Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you might be. I am Nicole BC, and you know everything. Okay, hello. How are you? Okay, well, I'm just going to get into it because we were batch processing and I've recorded a few episodes and it is getting dark outside, which means the lighting is about to get wackadoodle. So, not a curveball. I actually knew that was going to happen, but that's what we're going to talk about today. Depending on whenever you're listening to this, I'm pretty sure something shot across your bow recently and it probably scared the shit out of you. We have been living in the most unpredictable times. And on this podcast, I like to talk about creativity and business. I believe that our potential is unlimited and the possibilities are endless. But when you have been working on a plan and then 2024 happens, you might feel like, I don't know anymore. And I've been debating with, I usually do a big sort of live annual planning session. And by I do mean a few years ago, I did that because nothing normal has happened over the last few years for me. But planning, possibility, hope, all of those feel like they went the way of the pandemic. And I'm seeing people kind of default to some old habits, and we won't call them good habits, right? And it's because we are reacting. We are reacting to the surprises rather than responding to them. So what I want to do is ask, how do you show up when life throws you a curveball? Reactive or responsive approaches might seem like subtle differences, but they reveal profound spiritual and philosophical, I was going to say physiological, probably physiological, mainly philosophical truths for this sentence's purposes. And those truths shape our work, our relationships, and our lives. Hopefully, I somehow landed this plane and you'll not only understand the difference between being reactive or responsive, but you will actually learn how to truly own this choice to create some agency and transform your chaos into opportunity. So, like per usual, I'm going to try and share a couple aha things that I've certainly discovered in my work, in my own businesses, with my clients, and things that you can play around with in your own space to see if you can turn hopelessness into possibility. I mean, I think I sold that pretty well, but why should you care? Reactivity locks us into survival mode. It is stressful, it is rigid, it is defensive. And quite frankly, my friends, you know exactly what's going to happen because you've done this before. It's your old habits showing up again. We do that because they're familiar. They give us this sense of control. Ultimately, being responsive, it unlocks flow and creativity, but it is also accompanied with a little less certainty or control. It's intentional, it's creative, and it's growth oriented, but it's also expansive because it's freeing. We release our white knuckle of need to control everything that happens and recognize that was out of my control because it was unplanned and a surprise. How am I going to respond knowing what I know now? Entrepreneurs, leaders, and creatives, this is actually your edge. This is when you turn it all around. This is when you discover that thing that nobody else is doing or you didn't even know was possible. So whether you're navigating a tough negotiation, managing a meltdown, or solving a seemingly impossible problem, responsiveness is what will set you apart. And when we start to rely on our responsiveness, what we're actually tuning into is the calm in the storm, right? The eye of the storm where we can see what's going to happen next. This is literally why I have a job. I kind of deal with this, when I was reflecting on like, what can I really bring into this particular episode based on what's been going on recently? I talk about different things with different people all of the time. I bring to you what seems to be these thematic patterns that tend to show up in clumps. Like every week, I tend to have the same conversation with people. But when I take a step further back, it's like, what are we even talking about? Oh, we're talking about giving you the permission and skills and then strength to not do what you've always done, to do something different, to create something new, AKA turn your dreams into reality, right? So let's get into it. The spiritual philosophy of reactivity versus responsiveness, in my own words. Reactivity is rooted in our fight or flight instinct. It is the emotional reflex that comes from fear, from our ego, or from a sense of scarcity. Reactivity disconnects us from our higher selves, that future self that's already solved all of these problems. Reactivity goes, fuck you, bro. I'm going to do it my way. So when we think about it, and actually, I'm going to ask you to think about it. When was the last time? I'm laughing because I might have done this already a lot today. But when's the last time you fired off an email or a text message? In anger, in reactivity, you were surprised, it wasn't what you were expecting, and you just sent a response. And then you kind of wished you had edited it, let alone listened back to it, let alone not sent it in the first place. That, my friend, is reactivity at play. And I move so fucking quickly, especially when I feel like I am under threat. And I am so familiar with that sense of urgency. I do not like things undone. I do not like things just floating around out in the ether. And also, if I give myself space, firstly, whatever I do with that space is a million times better and more effective. But secondly, like, whew, boy, do I calm down in between, which is really all I actually want, right? So responsiveness is about creating a pause between stimulus and action. It's deeply rooted in mindfulness and self-awareness practices, sure. But Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning, if you haven't read that, my friend, please do. It's a very quick read, but if you've ever felt like you have a complaint, it will change your mind. Viktor Frankl put it perfectly. He said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. This is where freedom lies. I'm going to read that again. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. This is where freedom lies. So why do we default to reactivity? Studies on stress by neuroscientist Dr. Amy Arnsten show that under pressure, the prefrontal cortex, the brain's decision-making center, gets hijacked by the amygdala, our fear center. This neurological wiring is why reactivity feels automatic. But the good news? Responsiveness is a skill we can train through practices like meditation, journaling, and breath work. And those are probably going to feel pretty woo, but like actually just taking a breath or giving yourself a rule that if I'm upset, I'm not allowed to ... Or I ask if I can be excused to go to the bathroom so I can get my shit together. Like if you feel your heart racing, palm sweaty, mom spaghetti, sorry. Woo. Okay, BZ. Put some habits, some stop guards, some practices in place. Even if it's somebody that you work with really closely, someone who knows you, just any kind of knee-jerk response that you can put in between you and your reactivity. We're all going to be wired a little bit differently. I know that if I'm in like actual person with somebody and I start to get really upset, I've got to excuse myself. And I've been practicing that for 30 something, probably longer than that, 40 years, right? Like I have a few things in place, but where I really slip up is like text messaging. And so I put my phone on do not disturb. I won't look at my phone if I'm in the middle of doing the things. And if somebody sends me something, I'm trying my very best. What the stop guard I've put in place now is I send a voice message in response because I find, firstly, it disappears, right? But secondly, when you can hear my energy behind the words, there's less of a chance of miscommunication. But more importantly, the time it takes for me to construct that voice message is longer than it is the text message. So see how it's like a couple of different little hacks that I've introduced that kind of give me this space to ultimately say like, look, we should actually probably talk about this, right? Like this feels upsetting for nothing else. And you'll hear me say the word upset regularly because that to me is a lot less, there's a lot less energy behind saying I'm upset rather than I'm angry or I'm sad or I'm excited. It's like, oh wow, actually I'm just feeling a lot right now. I am upset. So let's chat it out. That's like my personal cue. So I would encourage you, we'll actually get to that. It's like talking about like, what are your cues? Responsive strategies for work. And I know that, one of the things that I love about my work is it's really easy to kind of create some boundaries or to just simply remove yourself from situations in your personal life. But at work, we don't always have the same permission to do what we would in our personal lives. And in fact, we need to sit in confrontational, uncomfortable, reactive spaces and still somehow toe the line, still somehow make sure that we are responding, even though everything around us might be in a deep state of reaction. So, research by Harvard Business School reveals that reframing stress as a challenge rather than a threat improves performance under pressure. So, next time you're in a meeting or a conversation, or you're staring at the gnarliest email ever, try asking, what opportunity is hiding here? This simple mindset shift opens the door to creative problem solving. And one of the things I used to do, I used to work for, and as a C-suite member of, there was 4 brothers who were in the C-suite, so they were really used to talking to each other in a kind of way. Also, these boys were kind of rough around the edges, and the emails that these guys would fire off were unconscionable. Like every single one of them was an HR 911. Like I cannot even believe you put this in writing, sir. Like, what the actual fuck? So what I used to do is I would sing their emails when I got them. So I'm actually not going to subject you to my singing. I almost just sang out some of the words that I have there. And I was like, you know what? We shouldn't. We actually like these listeners. We like you. I like you. I'm talking about myself in third person now. Anywho, sing it. Sing it to the tune of your favorite song. Sing it to a hilarious like hip hop or musical track. It will instantly change the way that you receive that information. And this is kind of the, like the like imagine the person who is like having a mental breakdown, like naked, and like it will absolutely diffuse the energy that you're experiencing from them. And what's interesting about that is it changes nothing about that external influence, that point of stimulus in terms of your pain or stress. It's you choosing to engage with that information in a different way. And that will change everything about how you feel, how you think, and therefore what you discover as opportunities in terms of the choices available to you. The power of co-creative communication. So this is one of the problems with digital communication, right? Is that we experience it in a certain way and then we just assume that's what's happening. And then we with that assumption take the next step. But when we are responsive, we are ultimately in collaboration. Responsiveness thrives in collaboration. So studies from Stanford talk about cooperative problem solving and how teams are then able to come to this first place, this first step of safety and security, because we're all agreeing on the same thing here. We're all eliminating any assumptions or hidden meanings or agendas, which contributes to this sense of security. And then when people feel safe, they express ideas without fear of judgment. This can produce 60% more creative solutions. In tough situations, start with empathy. Tell me how you're experiencing this. I am experiencing the tone of your voice, the meter of your speech, and the volume of your voice. Like you're really upset right now. And they might be like, oh, actually, I have an ear infection and I can't hear really well. Am I yelling? Like, I just had way too much coffee. I'll take it down a notch. Thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. Like, it can be that simple. Obviously, it's usually a little more complicated like that. But when we get in the habit of actually checking our own assumptions and also talking from this place of like, yo, here's what I'm hearing or here's what I'm taking away from this. Like, where are you at? We're continually testing the stability and the shared stability of the grounds that we're standing on. And then we're going to be able to move forward together. This is building an intuitive toolkit. And like, yeah, like fucking breath work and meditation. I know I say it a lot. But when we are operating with a regulated nervous system, we're more able to experience the tough stuff. I think in addiction, they talk about it: halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. If you're experiencing any of those four realities, the chances of you relapsing are 1,000% higher. So, what does that mean? That means do what you can to not let yourself feel lonely or tired or angry or hungry. You know what I mean? Like, stay on top of your own physical needs, pre-plan, resource yourself, because that's going to give you the ability to feel safe and secure, which is going to give you the confidence to actually deal with much bigger challenges. So back to like know your cue. I've been training on a new project recently, and I don't know why I thought I'd be able to go 8 hours without eating any food, but we got there. I knew there was like snacks and apples and shit like that in the fridge. And even though I didn't feel hungry, I was like, I am going to eat something at hour 6 because I know I'm going to get hangry. And I could feel my brain kind of grinding to a halt. It was a little bit later at night that I'm used to working as well. And that's what I mean by cues, like know thyself. And if you know that like Frank in accounting just really gets under your skin, make sure you've done some jumping jacks. You've talked to a fun friend. You've, maybe disassociated a little bit with some fun social media stuff. You've watched one of your favorite comedians. Like, go into that chat with Frank with a little bit of resiliency and preparedness around like the fact that this dude always gets under your skin. Or find something funny you can laugh about. Like, be giggling when you go in there, right? Most of us have a pretty hot button: abandonment, failure, people pleasing. And so when someone criticizes us or offers us constructive feedback, or we feel like we've been publicly called out, or like we fucked up, it's going to push that button, and we are immediately going to go down to that like dominant level 1-2 experience. We're going to go into fight or flight or freeze or fawn, and that's fine. That is the reaction. But when we recognize, this person disagreeing with me feels like they are going to abandon me, and I have some significant issues around that, we're at work. It's okay if they disagree with me. My life is not under threat here, but my job's under threat. Okay, well, your job is theoretically always under threat, and you still show up and do the damn thing every day. You know what I mean? It's just recognizing like, what is my hot spot? And when it gets agitated, what am I going to put in place so I do not react and I give myself the space, the freedom to respond? So write out your worst case scenarios, and also, just for funsies, the best case scenarios. My training, we call this AIM. I'm sure you've heard SMART: specific, measurable, actionable, realistic targets in terms of goal planning. Yawn. I know. AIM is what they added on to it, and that is acceptable, ideal minimum. And it's kind of this idea that like, if you plan for the best, but you also look at the potential worst, you're probably going to land somewhere in between. And there is an acceptable minimum in there as well. So write out the worst case and best case scenarios. This exercise will reduce your anxiety, but it will also illuminate some action steps you might have missed, including like some of this risk analysis stuff. There is absolute value in looking at like, well, what if the worst case scenario happens? And as we all know, things that you could never have planned for will also happen. But I'll tell you what, on the other side of it, when you know you did what you could, you are far less reactive. I am a big believer in when you know your cues, when you know your hotspots, when you've done some of the scenario planning, create some filters. So like in business, as an example, I'll often work with people because money is like one of the first things we typically tackle. And I will introduce some kind of a filter based on the client's very specific hotspots. But like, hey, if this is a $500 or less problem, this isn't a you problem. This is one of your team members, or $5,000, so on. So there's this threshold of like, you've already put structures in place to work on this. Now, if this is a hot spot for you, what is the threshold for where you will literally drop everything and worry about this? Or what, like if it falls below that threshold, we need to schedule this. We need to respond to it as opposed to react. And I'll get pretty detailed in that plan, again, depending on this person's level of reactivity. So another exercise that I did an episode about, like, I think it was the creating certainty and uncertainty, is the worry tree. I am reacting in this moment. Okay, can I actually do anything about this right now? Yes or no? most of the time it's actually going to be a no. So it's a loaded question, sure. But when it's a no, put it on your calendar and then move on. If it's a yes, then create a plan. Notice I didn't say take action. Don't react. Respond with a plan and put that up in front of you, because for any of us who have been through a lot recently, we're going to be pretty reactive. We're going to be like scanning the horizon for the next threat. And so just creating that threshold of, is this a threat in this moment? And can I do something about it now? If not, then it goes on the back burner. And we're going to focus on all of the other shit that actually is a very real threat if you're in that space, right? So I've talked a lot about Byron Katie's The Work. Look it up. But a simple one that's pretty easy to fucking remember are the 5 whys. This was actually developed by Toyota. I didn't know that until I started doing this research. But ask why until you get to the root cause of the issue. And for the most part, if you ask why 5 times, you're probably going to get there. So like as an example, why did the project fail? The team missed the deadline. Why did the team miss the deadline? They weren't clear on expectations. Why were they not clear on expectations? Communication broke down. Why did communication break down? The brief was ambiguous. Why was the brief ambiguous? Leadership didn't clarify objectives, timelines, and responsibilities. Oh, so you mean before we even started this, we could have just asked who's doing what, by when, and how will they get it done? Neat. Let's try that next time. Let's bake that into our pitch process. So with that, one of the things that I think gets forgotten when we start to shift from reactivity into responsiveness is an integration phase. So this isn't going to happen immediately. Like I said, once you discover what your hotspots are, and actually doing the 5 whys around this is really powerful. Like how do you get to an employee saying no to deep abandonment issues? Because someone, like asking someone to stay late for 15 minutes you might not connect the dots there, like why you are having such a strong emotional response to that. Quite frankly, if an employee asks you for something and it's a no, it should be very fucking neutral. Like it's kind of your job as the boss, right? Or if someone says no to you, also very fucking neutral until we explore a little bit. So asking like, why am I so upset about someone not being willing to stay 15 minutes late? They're disrespectful. Why do I feel like that's disrespectful? Well, if they appreciated me and they knew how hard I worked, they'd stay later. Why does this is 15 minutes. Why does this have anything to do with respect and appreciate? So on and so forth, right? Responsiveness connects us to the present moment, which is the only space where creation can happen. Reactivity is trapped in past patterns or future fears. I mean, that's one of the things I talk about on that worry tree episode is like worry is essentially something that's already happened or something that has never happened. And we're focusing our energy on that rather than like what's actually happening. So when we respond with what can I create now, this is where intuitive insights come from. So from a business perspective, responsiveness makes you a better leader. When you model calm, you inspire calm. Your team will follow you. You are leading them. So in a chaotic situation, which is business and ownership, who do you trust? The person panicking and creating this sense of urgency and need where everything's a priority, or the one who's grounded and present. And like, it kind of feels like they're acting almost from this delulu sense of faith, but like, I want a piece of that, right? So here are some ways to play with this in real time. Firstly, like, shut the fuck up. But seriously, in high stress situations, or especially conversations, silence is a superpower. You know you're not reacting if you're not doing anything and you're staying quiet. Instead of reacting, take a breath and let the other person fill the space. This pause will disarm you, but it'll also disarm the tension. And I guarantee you something unexpected will happen. So play with that. You'll hear, I've been playing with this idea of like limitation as an oracle. Like if I can't do that, what if I was just never supposed to? Like if I can't figure this out right now, what if it's just not what I'm meant to be doing in this moment? Creativity thrives in constraints. And if you've ever been to art school, you know, they'll be like, hey, we're playing with negative space today. Just draw the shadows. And you're like, What? Pressure doesn't kill creativity, it refines it. Embrace constraints as a canvas for innovation. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in art, science, and business happened because of limits, not despite them. And lastly, and I think you're going to relate to this one the most, emotional agency is a superpower. When I talk about the energetic levels, it is literally going, what do I want? What perspective, what feeling, what thought is going to connect me to that result? Psychologist Susan David says emotional agility is about being with your emotions, not dictated by them. Acknowledge your feelings, but let your values, not your emotions, drive your decisions. Feelings are not facts. Thoughts are not truth. They sure as shit feel like it. And this is not to invalidate what you're feeling or thinking by any means. It is simply to recognize it is a piece of information. And what you do with that will determine what happens next. This is about boundaries, my friend, but these are internal boundaries. And what you're essentially doing is building trust by committing to yourself. Like, what do I want? What am I willing to do to get it? Am I willing to shut the fuck up for a moment? Am I willing to not jump into action mode? Can I just take a second? By giving yourself these resources, you will be more successful. And this, I don't mean resources like money or people or these like externalized tools. What I mean is by resourcing yourself to recognize like, I got you. No matter what happens, I am going to make sure you're okay. And it might take me a minute to figure that out. And in fact, I need a minute to figure it out. Being reactive literally means you do not trust yourself or your environment. And again, we're now just back in binary. I have to, or ... You're giving yourselves ultimatums. You're forcing action out of fear. Reaction is your cue. Oh, fuck, I'm reacting. I didn't even know what whatever the excuses are that we always, that feeling is your cue. What is really going on here is this hypervigilance and this need for control. And at the end of the day, we should never act out of fear or pain. It is always going to result in limited success. Again, in business, this is one thing. In life, it is completely different. But boundaries create a sense of safety. This is why they are so important to play with. And again, I'm giving away Building Better Boundaries for People Pleasers, Guide to Building Better Boundaries. That's what it is. You can find it at show notes. Thank you. Setting up boundaries will enable you to feel safe. That's what these workflows, the worry tree, these blinders, knowing your cues, that's what this is all about. By literally practicing, I've got to go to the bathroom, or like I've got IBS or whatever it is, you're going to give yourself a pattern interruption and an opportunity to introduce some of these new techniques, and you will feel safe. This is story time. What I realized over these last few months for me is one of my favorite tools is money. And why? Because it gives me the sense of control. And I can be very reactive when it comes to needing control. So when I feel unsafe, I will invest in solutions, right? And I had a pretty gnarly experience with crypto. We've all been there. I've made this mistake many times before, but I took irresponsible risk because I wanted unrealistic rewards. And one of the things that can happen in crypto is, these 100x, 1000x paydays, but that can also be accompanied by 100x, 1000x lose days. And by tuning into my reactivity to this, what I realized is my own hypervigilance that was going on for this need to control. And on the other side of this now, and releasing any pretense of the ability to control one iota of my environment has left me feeling more free than I've ever felt in my entire damn life. And it has also introduced a new boundary, no crypto for, potentially ever, because I'm not responsible. I don't have the boundaries in place. I don't have the trust and the confidence any longer to follow my own rules. And you know what? It feels really fucking safe. I actually feel really good. And despite the fact that I'm missing one of the gnarliest bull runs that's ever happened in crypto and Bitcoin is at all-time highs, like I'm kind of really okay to sit on the sidelines for this one. So one of the things that happens here is we choose who gets access to us. I'm choosing what I am giving my energy to, what I'm going to participate in, who I am going to work with, what I am going to do. And if it doesn't feel safe, first and foremost, it's a hell no. If it doesn't feel expansive, energizing, challenging, adventurous, excellent, fun, real fun, it's a most likely a no. I need to figure all that out, which takes a level of responsiveness, right? Responsiveness isn't just a skill, it's a way of being. It's about stepping into life with curiosity and courage, even when it feels like the walls are closing in. My challenge for you this week, think about or experience, I mean, you're probably not going to have to try hard, one tough situation, and just simply pause before you act. Ask yourself what response would bring clarity, connection, or creativity to this moment. And in that pause, with that internal inquiry, let me know what happens. Please, 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 please. Yeah, that's all I got. I'm done. I am done. I'm responding to my own need to stop talking right now. Gosh, it got really dark. Okay, well, hopefully the lighting works out for this. Thank you so much for being here. You know where to find me. I recommended a bunch in this, and wherever this lands, happy holidays if you're celebrating anything, or go get some takeout Chinese or make your own. I love you.